Welcome to the Grounded Podcast with your host, Dr. Iman. This is a space where the intellectual meets the spiritual. I'm a professor, scholar of religion, and someone trying to find her footing. Together, we'll seek clarity not in passivity or bypassing, but in intuition, critique, and imagination. Some episodes are just me, reflecting on where I'm finding my footing. Others draw more closely from my own research on religion and spirituality, tracing where I've seen others find theirs. And sometimes we're joined by experts, friends, and even you, the listeners, learning with each other and seeking rootedness together. So wherever this episode takes us, I'm really glad you're here. Let's get grounded. Hello everyone, it is your host Iman, and today I'm finding grounding in the fact that it is the last day of Ramadan and the last day that I'll be fasting for a while. And it also just marks the end of a month and a time of some really deep contemplation, but also a month that, as I talked about in the previous episode, has really changes my relationship to work in this moment, which has also felt hard because I'm in the process of working and teaching full time as a professor while then adjusting to Ramadan's schedule. But I'm very excited because today's episode is grounded actually in a listener letter, and it couldn't have come at a better time when the end of this month also means the end of me putting off some writing that I have needed to do. The relationship between academic and writing is one that has been the topic of so many how-to books, so many essays, so many reflections. But I was asked by Bree, who asked me if I could reflect on how I make my writing practice a spiritual practice. And I thought no better time to reflect on that than this moment right now. So this question was inspired by a series of posts that I did as a 100-day countdown to needing to submit my dissertation. I had the date wrong. So it was actually 95 days of writing every day, or pretty much writing almost every day that I did in order to submit my dissertation and get it to the finish line, because I needed to have my degree in hand before I started my job. So it put me on a bit of a rush timeline that put a lot of pressure on my work and my need to get this thing done. And I want to talk today about 3 things that I did and that I use to make my writing practice what I consider a spiritual practice. And genuinely, thinking about it in that way is the only way I was able to both complete it, enjoy it for the most part as I was doing it, even though it was incredibly hard and difficult. I don't think all things that are enjoyable always feel good all the time, and allowed me to actually turn in a product that at the end of the day, I actually felt very proud of. People say the best dissertation is a done dissertation. That's 100% true. And it wasn't perfect. If anything, the writing process made me realize that perfection is an impossibility. What do people say? Perfection is the enemy of good, or the enemy of done. But there are 3 ways that I hope kind of cultivate this and turn writing into a spiritual practice that I hope is helpful to other people. And I think it extends beyond just writing. I think it extends into anything that you need to show up for every day and just do. The first thing I did was using it as a relationship to myself and to get to know myself, but then also not make it about myself. So I'll talk about that. I'll talk about how I ritualized it. And third, how I try to bring in a collective accountability to the practice. And these might sound very woo-woo and theoretical at the moment, but I'm going to break down what each of those actually meant to me in practice. So the first, making my writing practice as not just about getting the work done, but also as developing a relationship with myself, and what I would like to think as not a good or better relationship to myself, because I don't always find those terms good, better as very productive, but as having a deeper, more complex understanding of myself, and ultimately trying to think of writing as a form of channeling. So what do I mean by making it about a relationship to myself? I will never forget the first time I went to see a psychic, and one that I have adored and had been listening to for years, Alia Lovely, who hosts the podcast Spiritual Shit. I'll never forget that she asked me what felt like a blockage for me diving deeper into my own spiritual depth and spiritual intellectualism. And I told her that there's just always been something in my head that has told me that there can feel something indulgent and a little self-centered around spirituality talk that I felt. And I think that's often because coming from a Black Muslim tradition, there's so much emphasis on collectivity. So there was something that I felt in the modern spirituality space as being a little self-indulgent.
often. And I think that's for greater issues. But just speaking for a moment, personally, I remember her telling me the most spiritual thing that you can do is to develop a relationship with yourself. And when I think about the writing process, there's nothing more than having to show up and do something hard every single day that is going to bring up all the gunk in you and that you think about yourself that blocks you from doing what you need to do and doing what is best for you. I like to think about this as like how my ego shows up. And there's an Islamic concept called jihad al-nafs, or to basically struggle against the ego. And I think that people can often think that the ego is somebody who is the part of yourself that's like self-centered and lacks humility and all these things. But often for me, ego shows up as questions of self-worth and also the real need to feel like I am in control of everything, in control of my timing. So how this would show up for me. First off, every writer will tell you when you are sitting down in that chair, you can really encounter real feelings of worthlessness. You're sitting there, you're like, am I smart enough to write this? Am I going to write at the caliber of the books that even inspired me to write this project in the first place? Even right now, in prepping for this, I was thinking, oh my God, like, who am I to give somebody writing advice? All I've done is written a dissertation. Like, I still need to write my book, and I need to finish writing some chapters, and I need to finish writing this article. And I have all these pending writing projects, and I'm like, oh my God, who am I to talk about this? But again, that's my own ego and my own issues about self-worth coming up. And that's at least how it presents for me. So that was a huge blockage that I had to overcome in the writing process. And how, for me, I overcame that, or at least I found as a way of getting out of my own way, was starting to think about my writing as not about myself, as not about trying to perform a kind of intellectualism, to show my domination over the field, even though those are all things I had to do, not in those terms, but 100% my dissertation committee wanted to see that I knew the field and could articulate an intervention. Absolutely, they wanted to see me flex my intellectualism. But for me personally, I needed to put myself to the side to block out feelings of insecurity and not feeling good enough or not feeling smart enough to the side. And how I did that was I really focused on trying to have the writing process not just be exclusively about myself. So what do I mean by that? So my dissertation was an intellectual history of Black Muslim thinkers who were also Black nationalists. And I was looking at how their practices of self-determination in their Black nationalist organizing were not just political philosophies, but were forms of spiritual intellectualism. And so what I did was I focused each chapter on a particular mode of embodied knowledge that was important to these women's, these thinkers, these intellectuals' work. So each chapter was focused on a particular intellectual, and I was doing archival research and oral history interviews, and I took real inspiration from how two people write about the archives and the people that they think with in their research as ancestors, and that is Ahmad Green Hayes and Alexis Pauline Gumbs. Ahmad Green Hayes writes about his own work in the archive and the thinkers that he encounters, like Zora Neale Hurston, as archival ancestors, and Alexis Pauline Gumbs does a lot of writing and framing around her work as being ancestrally responsible. And so I thought to myself, okay, I want to make my writing process about what do I feel like these ancestors want me to know. If I take Louise Little, Betty Shabazz, and Safia Bukhari as my Black Muslim ancestors, as archival ancestors, what do I feel like the materiality of their sources, their words are trying to speak to me, and what is trying to speak through me? So then it became not about me using them in my work, but trying to think about how they're using me in their work. So I thought about me showing up every day to my writing desk, about me trying to channel things that were beyond me. And one might call this like a mindset shift or whatever kind of language you want to put to it. But for me, it would allowed me to see channeling as my writing method or my artistic medium. Yes, writing is the tool, but the channeling of the information that I'm trying to derive from these sources, the kind of thinking with, not just about the thinkers and the archival ancestors at the center of my work, I found so much more energizing when I thought about it like that, and not about like me trying to be this big intellectual and blah, blah, blah. the words were flowing through me. It opened up something inside of me. That's how I knew it was working. And one day I'm going to do a separate episode on intuition in the archive and how I feel like I use intuition to actually navigate and pick the sources that I end up writing about or encountering. That's a separate episode that I promise I will do, especially because I'm going to be spending all summer doing archival research. But for right now, I'm just talking about writing and thinking about my writing practice as a form of channeling my archival ancestors, as thinking with them, made me able to move out of my own way and move out of a lot of the talk and self-doubt that comes with writer's block and just the practice of writing. And of course, dealing with my own ego. Now, another big thing, I am a triple earth sign, Capricorn sun, Virgo moon, Taurus rising. There is nothing more than I love than to feel in control of everything in my life. Every day I wake up and I know exactly how I'm going to spend every hour of my day. Now, some people are like, oh my God, that's insane. But that feels like a warm hug to me in my life. But not being able to guarantee a particular kind of word count or a particular kind of page number that I would be able to hit every day was very hard for me. And I know friends who can pull all-nighters and write a chapter in a week, or who can write 5 pages in a single day and they can just grind like that. I am a slow writer. That's why when it was 100 days to that deadline, I was like, oh my God, that is crazy. It's only 100 days. People were like, girl, but you have 100 days. But to me, that felt very short because I know I need slowness. And I think in the kind of world that wants like instant results, recognizing that your pace works slower than some other people's, I think it can feel refreshing. And just acknowledge like that is just a part of me. But anyways, I had to let go of being like, I'm going to write 5 pages or 1,000 words every day. No, I had to tell myself, as long as I showed up and I sat at my desk for those hours I needed to clock in and lock in for, whether that produced 500 words or 5 pages of writing, I still clocked in and showed up and needed to do what I do. So rather than having my control centered on the outcome of the words, because maybe my channeling did bring me 5 pages that day, or maybe my channeling only brought me to some notes on a sticky note, or it only brought me to really beautifully crafting a paragraph. Because let me tell you, I can spend 6 hours on a paragraph and it itches my brain, but that's how I be getting in my own way. Even my advisors would be like, girl, what do you mean? But anyways, they would be like, I get it, but like, do you feel like your perfectionism might be holding you back? Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is it feels good at the same time. Indulging bad habits can feel extremely good in the moment. But anyways, so by thinking about it as channeling and not something I had fully control over, I was also able to release the idea that every day I was going to be able to control the outcome. As long as I sat down and I clocked in and showed up and did what I needed to do, that's what I could control. Just actually showing up to the computer and to the page, then I wasn't letting my ego and sense of control get in the way of actually what I felt like I needed to produce at the end of that day. So the second thing that I did was I ritualized the heck out of my workspace and my daily work routine. So what would I do? If my goal, this is what worked for me, and I hope that it works for other people. If the goal of my day was writing, I would start my day writing in a different form, and writing in a form that I felt like facilitated the kind of channeled thinking and the kind of channeled writing that I was trying to do in my work. So what I did was, before I even sat at my computer or opened my computer, I started my day with a different kind of writing. I would open my journal. I got a beautiful journal that when I looked at made me really happy. If you follow me on social media, you know that every day I journal, and I would write it to Allah, the universe, creator, whatever you call it, getting out my thoughts, getting out the thoughts that I woke up with and that were spinning in my head that day, but also trying to ask for what I needed in that moment. And also write down and let go of the things, the self-doubt that were getting in the way. Because if I just let those words of self-doubt just circulate and not go anywhere, they would just keep staying in my head. So I would write in my journal, get everything out that I had woke up thinking about. I'm the kind of person that I wake up thinking. My thoughts are faster in the morning than they are at the end of the day. And that is because I have a crazy dream life. I'd be going on the other side and I'd be working. I'd be showing up on this side and I'd be working. But anyways, so I just wake up with my thoughts always really, really racing. And so journaling helps me kind of return to myself after sleeping. And then in my own practice, I would also write a note to my ancestors, including the archival ancestors and the women at the center of my dissertation that I was thinking with and writing about, and also my blood ancestors that I know and that I don't know. And I would write to them telling them that I appreciated, that I loved them, that I was grateful that they had left us so much to inherit, that it is because of everything they left us to inherit that I get to spend my days thinking with them and thinking about them as a tradition and as a whole. And I would also write to them asking them for help and asking them for the things that I needed that day. Maybe I needed help outlining. Maybe I needed help like just trying to figure out what the heck I was trying to say in this paragraph. Maybe I needed help trying to be in a receiving mode to hear the feedback that I needed to hear in order to improve and make the edits that I needed to make. So I would write to them and develop a real personal relationship with them. That was really important to me. And honestly, I feel like has been one of the most spiritually nourishing things that I feel like has come out of my dissertation writing practice is I never in my life have felt such a deep ancestral connection and presence than I do right now. I know it has always been there, but the way that I feel a kind of intimacy and closeness to my ancestors in this moment, I'm so grateful for it. I really am. I also read a bunch of books on ancestor veneration, and I made myself a altar at the corner of my desk, like a little mini altar. I actually am trying to make and have plans for a much better one in my office now that I have my own place. But I made a little altar in the corner of my desk, complete with the candle, the sword, the mirror, the offerings, and pictures of the archival ancestors, the three women at the center of my dissertation, as well as my own past loved ones, my dear cousin, my niece, my grandmother. So that when I was writing, every time I was looking at my computer and my peripheral vision, I also was seeing them. So it made me think, okay, we are actually writing together. Two people that I love that taught me a lot about ancestral veneration in a really practical way is Ahimi Ora and Juju Bay. I will put their works and their books also into the show notes because that really helped me think about how I might go about ancestral veneration and then to also think about my writing also as a form of ancestral veneration. That was really important to me. Again, for my own productivity, for my own relationship to the field, because I don't necessarily find the impetus of academic scholarship, which can frequently be to dominate, to distance, to create objectivity, as spiritually nourishing in a way that makes me productive. Now, that's just me. Some people do find that 100% nourishing. But for me, I knew that that wasn't going to lead me to be able to do what I needed to do. So again, like I'm saying, this is my approach and how I had to think about it. I had to turn it into the spiritual practice, but also what this ritualizing did is that it made the practice of writing one that was deeply sensorial. Just think about how important the senses and the aesthetics are. I would even put essential oils on, just making it an embodied practice that is not just about mind to paper, but is about engaging sensorially with what you are doing through the candle, through the plant that I really attended to also as I was doing my dissertation. Actually, a friend gave me this amazing advice that when you are starting on a new journey or going through something hard, getting a new plant and seeing it grow a little by little every day also allowed me to see I am also making progress and growing little by little every day. And it was really beautiful. So shout out to Nia. Thank you so much for that advice because I still take it with me to this day. And that's why I have 4 new plants in my new place. And they remind me that even during this process, when growth can feel hard to see, it is still happening. So the third thing that I did was I also made my writing process about collective accountability. And I'm seeing that a through line for all of this is a very womanist, Black feminist approach to the I, the first person, the me, myself, and I, which is to always see it as a we. And I actually find a lot of energy in that. And so what I did was try to make my writing practice one of a collective accountability and allowing my community to also hold me accountable to actually doing the thing and showing up. Because it's one thing to not show up and that just impact yourself, but it's another thing to not show up and people be like, girl, where you at? What you doing? So how I did that, I did a little social media countdown, 100 days of writing. Now I got a little shy on Instagram because I realized that future peers and colleagues and other academics follow me on Instagram. And so then I felt a little shy about expressing myself in this moment. I felt a little vulnerable there in that space in terms of just navigating social media professionally and my own sense of humor and my own Black femme aesthetics and what have you. So I've gotten much better about that, as you all know, because now I'm back on Instagram feeling much more at liberty to be myself. So I switched to TikTok. People were like, girl, you disappeared after day 70 on Instagram. Where did you go? We didn't see you until then. I was like, actually, I went to the strangers on TikTok. I just really like the vibe over there. It's more casual. And I thought I was able to not just use the videos to be like, here's what I wrote today. And I did, but also use the videos as a means of teaching around and about the things that I was writing about to remind myself, people other than myself, other than my dissertation committee, even people outside of academia actually care and want to know about this thing that I'm writing. People want to know about embodied knowledge. They want to know about intuition and channeling and conspiring with the divine, all these terms that I write about. They want to know about Black Muslim history. So being able to share even just the smallest tidbits, even if it was a book that I read or something that I had encountered that day that I knew wasn't going to make it into the dissertation, with a larger audience reminded me, wait, I'm not just doing this for myself to get this PhD. I'm doing this because I'm trying to carry on a tradition and produce knowledge that people actually want to know about. They find entertaining, they find engaging, they find necessary for this moment. So using social media as a way of, one, sharing people, okay, this is what I'm doing, come with me along this timeline, but also to remind myself that people actually care about this beyond the academy is super important to me. Public scholarship has always been very important to me. Now, very practically as well. One thing I love is a timeline. I love a deadline. I actually hate deadlines, but they are good to me because I'd be getting them done. And so what I also did was I made a bunch of small deadlines within that 100 days with one of my advisors, where I had 4 or 5 deadlines within that 100 days where I actually owed her writing and owed her pages that I would then get feedback on that allowed me to make it to the finish line and not fall behind, to really set a pace for myself. I knew the dissertation needed to be done. I knew I had 100 days. And in my mind, I could see and I could map exactly what I needed to do every single one of those 100 days in order to reach that hit submit button at the end. And so I wrote all those timelines and wrote that work plan out, and I submitted to her, and I was like, these are the deadlines we're going to work with. And I held myself to it, and she held me to it. She would always tell me, I don't think you're behind. When I would be like a week behind, because at the end, I was like 2 weeks behind schedule, but I had incorporated enough time at the end so that I could have that buffer. She'd be like, you know that I don't think you're behind. And I would be like, yes, I know you don't think I'm behind, but this tripler son, I feel behind because we are not on schedule. But all that to say, it's actually creating a plan and sharing that plan with somebody that you respect and that who you also don't want to waste their time is extremely helpful. So those are the 3 things that I did to help. I started with Alia Lovely telling me the most spiritual thing that you can do is develop a relationship with yourself. But I also found through this writing practice that the most spiritual thing you can do for your work is invite others into it and make your work about a larger collective. Through channeling, through ritualizing an archival connection, and through seeing the practice as something that you do in community and in collective with people, rather than the genius model of just sitting down and cranking out a bunch of words like Beethoven hid in them keys. This is 100% just a part 1 and the first time I'm going to be talking about this. And Brie, I'm so grateful to you for asking me this question because it's allowed me to really reflect on what made me able to actually finish and get to that deadline and submit the dissertation. And today I'm finding grounding on the fact that sometimes you just have to make time to do the thing and just show up. You can't control the outcome, but if you just show up and do it, then you can do it. And I'm saying this as I am rushing to record this. It is the last day of Ramadan. I have to take a flight immediately after work. I gotta be in my classroom in 40 minutes, but I still showed up and sat here to try to get this episode out on a Monday because, again, I also do the same thing around this podcast. This podcasting is a version of writing for me, but is also a spiritual practice. So I have applied this formula, and I'm realizing now it is actually a formula to not just writing, but to everything that I do and that I need to show up and be disciplined for. I know that if I turn something into a spiritual practice, then I can meet it with discipline. That's a very Black Muslim practice right there, and I'll talk about that one day more, but that is where I'm at. I really hope you enjoyed the show. If you liked it, if you got something out of this, please share it with a friend. Follow me on social media at Iman, ABDK, IMAN, ABDK. And thank you so much, Brie, for this listener letter. If you want me to answer a question having to do with anything where the spiritual meets the intellectual, maybe you read something, maybe you've got a general question, maybe you've got a work question like Brie did, send me a DM. I'm working on getting us an email and getting us a website, but for right now, slide in my DMs. I see them, I look at the requests, and I would love to answer your questions. Please don't forget to rate and review us, and I'm about to head to class, that's why I'm sounding a little rushed, but I will see you guys here next Monday. Bye-bye.